want to invite up on the stage Mike van der Heijden. Mike is the CEO of Portal.Ventures. And what I love about what he's doing is he's trying to talk to us about the future of SEO in an AI-driven world.
That's right.
And I think you always have very, very good insight. So,
Appreciate
Mike, the bar has said hi. Over to you.
Thank you, Simon. Right, so we'll get straight into it. We've got a couple of things to cover off. So today I want to talk to you guys about SEO, but more importantly, any of the other common buzzwords that you might have heard. It's the LLMs, the GPTs, and the augmented search. And the inevitable question of, is SEO dead, right? So why are we then still talking about SEO? Well, I'll show you this slide. This slide hasn't actually changed much from the presentation last year. But if you'll have a look, you can see that Zillow, Rightmove, real estate, 45% of real estate's traffic is still organic search. Rightmove, 40% is still organic search. And if we have a look at the cousins, the auto portals, very similar number. So when you add that up, it is still a significant amount of traffic that goes on that comes from organic search. We're going to talk about Google, and I'll explain to you in a second why we're going to talk about Google. It's simply this. Google now produces gets 14 billion searches per day on Google. And when I did this presentation last year, which was data that was a year older than that, it was only 8.5 billion searches. So in the last 2 years, that gap has gone from 8.5 to 14 billion searches a day. The closest competitor to that right now is still Bing, who hovers around 900 million to 1 billion searches per day. And when we extrapolate that out, we've got 14 billion searches per day. That's 417 billion searches every single month, and that's over 5 trillion searches per year. So what do I want to cover today is how has Google and search evolved over the past decade? I did a version of this last year, but obviously there's been a couple of changes in the last couple of months even. What can we actually, what on earth do we optimize for now? Is it Google? Is it LLMs? Is it AI? Let's get into that. And what can portals do now to make the most of it? So if we take a step back in 2014, Google has started this machine learning exercise where Google introduced the Google Vault, which was basically a readable encyclopedia that stored all the information. And they came up with this concept of expertise, authoritativeness, and trustworthiness. So everyone can publish information, but there is now a little bit of weight behind who you are, what you publish, and how often you publish, and do you actually know what you're talking about. Then we moved on to something called RankBrain that was introduced in 2015. In 2015, 5% of the keywords that people typed into Google had never been searched before, right? So you can imagine Google really now wanted to understand your query and how it relates to what you were talking about. If you were searching for a Grace game console published by Sony, Google was going to understand that you were talking about a PlayStation. And so that evolved into very useful experience data. So rather than just returning results, it now started to understand what you were trying to search for, and it started to anticipate it. In 2018, Google came out with the contextual understanding, or what they call BERT, which for short was bidirectional transformer model. It was basically to try and understand if you put a search query in, what came before it, what came after it. He got bitten by a python. Google now understands that it's not the programming language, but you were actually talking about the snake. In addition to that, they understand not only the query, but they understand the context of your query, which is really important. In 2021, we're talking about the AI advancement, or the first time that the AI really came into Google's vocabulary. They introduced the AI advanced, the multitask unified model, which was basically understanding your query, your context, but now across different mediums and across different languages. We've now, in 2022, Google really doubled down on the experience, on the data. So it was talking about your expertise, your trust, your authoritativeness. What they now wanted to understand was, well, the data that you're publishing, is it actually first-hand data? Are you just given out information, or is this information that you firsthand experienced? And then in 2023, the world came to an end almost because SEO was going to be dead because Google had now introduced a search generative experience, which if you have a look, it came up with all sorts of suggestions and it looked pretty flashy. That quickly dwindled down as a search experiment, which then evolved into what you probably see now, the Google AI overviews. I'm looking for a good bike for a 5-mile commute with hills, and it's going to give you a whole bunch of information. And then earlier this year, Google has now released what it's called the Google AI mode, which is essentially Google AI overviews allowing you to drill down with an LLM version to get more information as you're searching. This only came out, I think, about 6 or 7 days ago, so this is quite new. But they've also introduced the new concept of the AI augmented search, right? So AI augmented search, in a nutshell, is basically a purpose-built algorithm for online search with real-time access to information, and it's based on Google's previous Gemini large language models. So now we've got that out of the way, what have we actually learned over the past decade? We know that Google has been training us to search more explicitly, leading to more specific and longer search queries, right? We've all had talks about how people are looking for 2-bedroom homes in Spain with a bathroom, a pool, and a garage. But to do that, it needs factually correct information from trusted experts and authorities. Everyone here, right? The real estate portals. And then it takes that information, it aggregates it, interprets it, and then spits out, hopefully, in a more useful way, the answer that you were looking for. And so, considering we now have traditional SEO, we have LLMs, augmented search, agentic search, the question I often get asked is, well, what's my AI strategy? What are we going to do for LLMs? What are we going to do for this? So for that, what I really want to do is break it down simply. This is not going to be highly technical, but it will give you a really good understanding of how these things actually operate. We all know the traditional search result, right? How much is rent for an apartment in Paris? Everyone is used to this result. It's essentially someone asks Google a question, Google goes through its index and goes, hey, I have a couple of documents that match the search query that you're looking for. I am going to give you that answer. Then we got introduced to the large language model, your ChatGPTs, if you will. The same query, how much is rent for an apartment in Paris? We now see there's unfurnished apartments for a 1-bedroom, 2-bedroom. It's got a little bit more information. So the large language model is a type of artificial intelligence that excels at processing, understanding, and then generating back human language. And it can also detect, obviously, patterns of search. But you can see it's still very similar to what Google had already been trying to do. So what happens here is you and I ask a question to the LLM. The LLM goes back to its data set that it knows. And the restrictions with the large language model is they're typically trained up until about a year back. So ChatGPT right now, I believe, is still only trained up to about 2024. And so it's going to attempt to give you an answer. The problem with the original LLMs was it might not have all the data, it might not be up to date, and it starts to hallucinate and give you a bit of wacky results sometimes. So what came next was the AI augmented search, or RAG, results augmented generation results. And that's what we see now as Google AI overviews, right? How much is rent for an apartment in Paris? Similar sort of information with some citing of sources down the left-hand side. So the AI augmented search is essentially a new version on top of the LLM, which is essentially we ask a question, it goes through an LLM who then looks back in its data set, which we know is up until a certain time. It'll get that information, but at the same time run a fresh content retrieval system that basically queries the web in real time and says, is this information still relevant? If so, give me the adjusted answer, right? So we're going from traditional search to a large language model, which is on a pre-trained set of data, to augmented search, which is a preset trained of data with real-time information coming in. And then the last that we'll probably hear a lot more of today is the agentic search, right? So in this case, we all know about Operator GPT, if you're paying the $200 and you live in the United States. how much is rent for an apartment in Paris? It'll take 5 or 6 minutes. It will go out. It will visit websites. It will collect your data, and it will then try and spit that back to you. And so the way that that works is you, again, ask the operator a question. I want to know all the apartments for sale in Paris. What it does, it uses AI agents to go out and do this informational search. So it's an AI-powered tool that goes beyond just typical keyword searches, and it understands your user intent, but it also understands complex questions and can autonomously make decisions. It can go through a list of search results and say, well, hang on a second, these are all the apartments in Paris, but these ones are too expensive, these ones don't have a pool, and it will make that decision for you. And then what it does, it aggregates that back to a third agent who might then synthesize that information and give you an answer back. If I haven't lost you by now, I think we're going to get to the point where there's a really good understanding that all of these methods still very much rely on finding, aggregating, and interpreting data that already exists and outputs an overview with the answer. So having said that, everyone has been asking me, is SEO dead? How are we shifting? It's important to understand that even though these transformational things now exist, and this is purely related to search, it's that it still needs your information to be able to train their data sets and to be able to return search results. So what would I recommend marketplaces do today, or at least start considering today, is the AI and LLMs optimize for content and context. Google traditionally optimized for content, which is, I'm looking for a search query, here is all the documents that I have that search query. AI and LLMs seek to understand us more. If you're looking for a 2-bedroom apartment in Paris, it will give you a list, but will then ask, what's your budget? Do you want a pool? Do you want a garden? Does it need to be near schools? It can now do that, but it can't do that if the portals do not publish the information. So if you want to come up in these AI overviews or in these ChatGPT overviews, what you're going to have to produce is content that answers these questions. It's no longer, 10 search results and here's 10 listings and go nuts. No, we need to actually tell them how much is the average rent for a 1-bedroom, 2-bedroom, 3-bedroom. How much is it if you want a pool? How much do you want to pay for an extra a balcony? The next thing is we need to have more complete data on your properties. And I keep hammering on about this, and there's some great people here that do this type of information. And I think this slide's been come up in more presentations than I can remember. But there is a lot of information out there. There's a lot of tools out there which you can use to basically get a more complete set of data. And we need to make that data available to whoever has the audience, right? I've seen a couple of presentations and I've heard a couple of talks about people saying, we need to block the LLMs, we need to block the AI bots. All you're going to do is go, okay, they're going to get that data somewhere else. And if you're going to exclude yourself from that data set, unfortunately, you're going to miss out. Because organic search is still all about understanding the listing that has a pool, that has a courtyard, is near public schools, is under $1 million. Without that information, I'm sure someone else will put up their hand given that information, and you're simply going to miss out on what used to be organic search traffic, but has now morphed into, we'll call it referral traffic. If you look in your referral traffic, how much is coming from ChatGPT? And I'd be happy to argue with anyone here, is that a new channel, or is that actually organic search in sheepskin clothing? And lastly, you want to get coverage from relevant media, news, and websites in your industry. If there's one thing that AI has taught us, is that authority, expertness, and basically being recognized as an industry leader has become more and more important. So one of the areas that we really highly recommend is how can you, as a portal owner, as the CEO, as the C-level, get involved with podcasts, with anything to do to get the name out there and to be seen as an authority. And so that was it for me. I'm now assuming there's probably a couple of questions.
Absolutely right, there are questions. There are always questions. In some future, we will not even visit a property site anymore and just give our requirements to AI directly to surface the results from various sources. Actually, that's a question, not a statement.
Now, it's absolutely right. But at the end of the day, it doesn't matter. the involvement of where your eyeballs are coming from, right? I'm not the generation that's on TikTok and Facebook and all that sort of stuff, but I know that's where the next generation is. And if you can organically get people from that source back to your website, it shouldn't matter whether it's from Google or Bing. It's without having the information out there, none of the channels will be able to send you any traffic.
Okay. But if you think about that, at the moment, the role of a portal is to aggregate the content to make it easier for me to then search through the content.
Yes.
And hopefully through sometimes it'll be straight away, but 99% of the time it's a long process over 2 or 3 months. I'm searching all the listings and I'm eventually finding 1 or 2 houses that I'm going to make a bid on or try to buy, and then I find my dream home and move in. How does then this agentic search change that dynamic? Or doesn't it change the dynamic?
I think the agentic search is a really good concept. If you're going out and booking a haircut and you're going to go and order your pizza or a restaurant reservation, great. It can do the task that you normally do all the time. Where I think agentic search has got a little bit left to go is when you're doing research. Agentic search isn't originally built for discovery or a discovery layer. It's more, how can I make your life easier by doing this for you? So people will go, find me all the 2-bedroom apartments in Madrid, and it will come back with a list. But right now, the accuracy of that list, the accuracy of the information as a discovery layer isn't at the point where I think it would be where people would trust it intimately.
Is that just a function of time?
100%. It will get better over time.
Yeah. So
100%.
this is the worst it's going to get.
Yeah, it will get a lot worse, but it depends on how you look at it, right? The agentic search, if you have a look at operator.gpt, the first thing it does is take your search query and put it into Bing and then go through the search results.
Yes.
So ultimately, if you're not in Bing, if you're not ranking, it's not going to consider you as a viable source. And so therefore, you will miss out any referral traffic.
Right. Now, does the agentic search differentiate between a portal and an agency?
No, it doesn't differentiate between anything. If you publish the information, if you got a more complete set of data, it will take that into consideration.
Okay. Is there a scenario where an agency, as I'm thinking on my feet here, an agency could actually put a subset of their data on a portal
Correct.
and have a macro set, like a much larger set, sitting on their own site?
100%. And we see that happen now, right? It's real estate agents are very particular about the little description that they write for their property. And the portals have been fighting against that because they go, well, you know, there's 5 portals and we all got that same little description. And Google starts going, well, the one that's been around the longest typically wins. In Australia, that's REA. If I set up Mike's Real Estate, I'm likely never going to come up for that property. And so it's already started with that, where real estate portals are rewriting the descriptions to better fit what they want to present for that property.
Okay. Which is an interesting challenge with the person who's paying you to advertise and you're rewriting their content. Okay.
They're not big fans, I'll tell you well.
I can understand why. How is SEO different from GEO, Gen AI Engine Optimization? Someone's getting in fast with the acronym.
So I think that was the whole point, was there is not much different. It's the way that you present the data that might be interpreted differently, but the underlying source is still your information, your data. So it is still rooted in the fundamentals of what you're doing for SEO. That's going to be important for Gen AI, for whatever you want to call it these days. It still relies on one source, multiple sources of data.
Okay. What's interesting is, and I'm going to use my mate Mal McCallion, for those who don't know, he runs Model Prop in the UK. If you have met him, he's been at conferences before. And what he's doing is spending a lot of time with agencies in the United Kingdom to find non-digitized data.
Yeah.
Right? So, you know, they go out down to the basement, open up dusty files, getting them out, and then find ways to scan them and get them digitized, because it's unique data.
Correct.
That doesn't actually exist on the internet at this point. Is
It's
that a sensible strategy?
100%. And you don't have to look back that far. When you looked at publications that went digital, that digitized all their old publications, and that became unique content, that drove a lot of traffic for them over time. So I think this is the next iteration in real estate where that is starting to happen.
Okay, and then they will own that historic content.
Correct.
They
And
become the unique.
Exactly,
Okay.
100%.
Okay. Last question is: will portals, portal parsers, can they work without humans? Just managed with AI. We change the design, generate text via AI, mix photos equals endless traffic.
Sounds nice. Yes, parsers can work without humans because essentially what it does is it's trained on our behavior. So if we want the parsers to do a better job, we need to go there and train them. A perfect example of this is now in big media or in newspapers where a lot of journalists have been let go and lost hundreds of thousands of jobs. But they're now being hired back by specialist industries like agriculture to come back and actually train AI prompts. How can we improve this prompt? Is the result any good? And continuously feed back information to their own LLM, and therefore they're having a good time getting unique data sets.
Okay. Last question at the last one. If AI search only cites, which it should be cites one source, does this mean SEO shifts from a top 10 game to a winner-takes-all model?
No, so AI-driven search does not only cite one source. It'll cite whatever source it thinks has got the most complete context. So we've seen sites that are ranking number 1. We've seen sites that have been pulled down because the data set is at least a year old and the website doesn't exist, but still being used in LLMs. So it's all about the context of the information that you have.
Okay. Mike, thanks very much. I love what you guys are doing, and if anyone wants to understand more, grab him over a beer.